Welcome to Quora Anonymous. If this is your first time and you like the video, please like and subscribe. If you would like to read along, turn on closed captioning with the 3 dots in the upper right corner. Now, let's begin. What has a cop said that left you completely dumbfounded? First, a little background. I was in the process of a divorce, and I decided to rent a room in a private home while details were sorted out. I answered an ad on Craigslist and went to meet the homie owner. She seemed nice enough, about 15 years younger, attractive, athletic, and friendly, so we agreed on a price, and I paid first, last, and deposit. Everything was great for a couple weeks. Then things started to get a little strange. Little odd things said and then denied, hyper-emotional behavior, things like that. Then I came home from work and found a booklet on my bed. It was a gift album of erotic photos of my landlady, one of those boudoir shoots, but this one was rather explicit. In addition to the normal lingerie shots, there were spread shots, toy shots, etc. In the center fold was a note to come upstairs. I quietly set the album on the dining table and went to sleep. I had enough going on without an affair with a younger, slightly crazy woman. Things were kinda tense the next morning. It was Saturday, so we both were home. The album sat there all day, with neither of us mentioning it. That evening, as I was fixing a snack, she came into the kitchen in the negligee from the album and asked it. I found it sexier in person. I said yes, but I'm not able to get into anything, casual or not, while sorting out my divorce. To say she flipped would be an understatement. I gathered stuff for the night and went to a friend's. The next day when I returned, there was a 10-day eviction notice on the front door. That very weekend, I was there with my truck and trailer, the truck bed full of boxes, the trailer half full, and my adult son bringing out boxes while I loaded. I was very surprised to hear a voice behind me. I need you to tell me why you haven't moved out of this nice lady's house. I turned, and there is a Portland City police officer, hand on gun, feet spread past shoulder width, about a foot from me. I sidestepped away and replied that I was in the process of moving as we spoke, and that the written notice gave me until the following Wednesday, so this was not a police matter. He disagreed and actually stood by, following my son and I as we rushed carrying my boxes up the basement stairs and to the sidewalk. As I knelt to pick up the last box, the officer told me to wait a minute and give him the house key right then, if that was all of my belongings. I refused, telling him I would give up the key after a walkthrough to ensure that I had everything and had not forgotten to pack anything. This cop actually drew his weapon, pointed it at me, and demanded her key. Of course, being the idiot I am, I told him to shoot me. I would give up the key on Wednesday now, and not before, as my rent was paid, and that was the eviction date. He then said, I won't shoot you, I'll just arrest you. Now I knew, if he did that, I would be in jail till I saw a judge Monday, so I went ahead and gave him the key. Guess what the one thing I left there was? Paperwork I needed for the divorce, which had come the day before. I forgot to check for mail that had arrived between my leaving and moving. It all worked out, but I never have forgotten how helpless I felt in that basement bedroom, facing the barrel of that gun, knowing that he could shoot me, and with no witness, nothing would be done. Knowing that he knew that. Knowing that if someone points their gun at you, they are willing to kill you. And knowing that anything I might try to do to protect myself, even after being shot, would just be considered more justification for his shooting me. I'm not physically intimidated by any man, haven't been since my youth. I have extensive training, and was a competitive fighter. That was the first time as an adult that I felt helpless before another. He could arrest me, shoot me, kill me, and that would be it. No one would question it. Could I take his gun? Almost certainly. Could I take him down and cuff him? Again, almost certainly. Did that matter at all? Not one little bit. At that moment, he was God. Acting completely outside the law, but with the full weight and authority of the law, he could end my life, or just take all worth of life away for a significant time. Even if I successfully defended myself, I would be a criminal for doing so. I trusted and respected law enforcement before this. Now I just fear them. By the way, I'm white, well groomed, and was at the time earning good money. There was no racial component, no class component, there was just a power-maddened man with a gun willing to break the law to impress a pretty woman. I don't know what to wish for anyone to take from this. I certainly don't wish for cops to be disrespected or anything, but this was my experience and how it affected me. I now will do anything to avoid contact with Leo and will record if I can't avoid contact. I will, for my own protection, refuse to answer even innocuous questions and will constantly ask if I'm detained or free to go. I fear them and just want to get away. I fear them in a way I don't fear a private citizen with a gun, because it is not the gun I fear, it is the full weight and authority of the law, brought down on me unjustly, and without recourse or defense. And we should all fear that. We rescue a lot of dogs and the last few dogs have had issues. My current dog, Sky, aka Pookie Skywalker, is a husky Malamute, and has stage 1 kidney disease. He had been living in the wilds in Kentucky and acquired many parasites. He had worms in his intestines, worms in his blood, not heartworms, something else, fleas, and God knows what else. Well, I do know what else. He had leptospirosis, a spirochete that migrates to the kidney and destroys kidney tissue. Sky had stage 1 kidney disease. He cannot concentrate his urine. It's like water. Pretty much has the specific gravity of water. He drinks a lot of water. He pees rivers, lakes, and puddles the size of small goldfish ponds. The vet said, let him drink all the water he wants, and pee all he wants, and he will probably live to be an old dog. At the time, you think, cool. I can deal with that. But the reality is that it's a bigger, much bigger, responsibility and everyday reality than you would care to deal with. So what it means to me is that I take Sky, Pookie Boy, with me everywhere. I take him to work with me every day. I make sure he's watered and peed all day long, every day. He's my boy. He rides shotgun with me everywhere I go. Wilkinder shotgun. He actually has the whole back seat. I have a special backseat hammock, for lack of a better word, that protects the car seat and gives Pookie a little back nook when he wants to nap, and protection should I have to stop quickly, which I do, unfortunately, more frequently than I care to admit. So Pook is pretty cool when it comes to the car's backseat riding rules. In the summer I cannot keep the windows rolled up. It's too dangerous. Children have died in cars with temperatures as low as 63 degrees. The car becomes a greenhouse. At 70 degrees, very pleasant in Wisconsin, on a sunny day, after a half hour, the temperature inside a car with closed windows is 104 degrees. After an hour, it can reach 113 degrees. When temperatures outside range from 80 to 100 degrees, the temperature inside a car parked in direct sunlight can quickly climb to between 130 to 172 degrees. Fatal to children or pets. Quickly fatal. So when Pookie and I venture out on a hot summer day, all the windows are down, and the sunroof is wide open. Now, Pookie is, after all, a husky. He's very independent, stubborn, difficult to train. He's an escape artist, and I've had to pick him up at the local police department several times. He has a chip. If you own a husky and don't have him chipped, well, you're crazy. Okay. So yet, without any training, he stays in the backseat of the car. Personally, I don't get it. I do not know why he stays on his own. And people notice this all the time, that he stays and comment on it. I can't help it. I admit it. I jerk them along. I say, I'm the alpha of this here wolf pack. If I say stay, he had better stay. It's not true, of course. Pookie stays only because he wants to. He's not staying because of me, at all. He's just fucking smart, is all. It was about 90 degrees Fahrenheit out on a very warm summer day in Wisconsin. I was running errands and Pookie, as usual, was riding shotgun in the backseat with his head out the window as I cruised down the city streets. I pulled into a Blaine's Farm and Fleet, which is like a ginormous hardware store. Blaine's is huge and consequently has a huge parking lot. I actually parked pretty far away from the store. I was going to be in the store about 10 minutes, 15 minutes maximum, as I knew exactly what I was getting. I was going to be back quoting, and out lickety split. I left Pookie Boy in the car. All the windows rolled down, and the sunroof wide open. So I go inside Farm and Fleet, get what I need, pay, and leave. Elapsed time. Maybe 10 minutes maximum. I walk back to the car and the first thing I notice is that a cop has parked directly across from me, and he is sitting in his squad car. I ignore him, open the trunk with my electronic key fob, and begin putting my purchases in the trunk of the car. Police officer gets out of his car and walks around to where I am. Police officer, you now saw me and called this in. Me, okay. I guess that's good that people are concerned about animals in a car on a hot summer day, but I think that they wasted your time. Officer, no response. Alarm. Pregnant pause. Me, is this illegal? I have all the windows open and sunroof open. Is this illegal? Officer, no. I just wanted you to now sue me and called it in. Me, KIIIII. At this point I was irritated and wanted to say whatever, but I didn't. I have several friends who are cops and I know for a fact that it is not an easy job, and once somebody called it in, this officer was required to show up at my car, so I'm not going to get sassy with him, even if I felt it was all unnecessary. Maybe he felt it was unnecessary as well. I don't know. He didn't really articulate what his point was by saying, you now Simone called this in. It was kind of cryptic, in that he gave me no indication as to his thought process regarding the situation. End result, we both stood there looking at one another for a timeless moment. Then he turned around to go back to his squad, and I got into my car and left. It was a very weird and awkward encounter, but I knew I was in the back right, and there was nothing wrong with how I handled my dog. He was just as cool in the car as he would have been outside, maybe even cooler as he was in the shade and resting. It was winter, and we lived in a house that was poorly insulated and only had one Vanguard heater in the living room, so in the winter I'd move our bed into the living room and hang blankets to block off the room so we could stay warm. My husband had forgotten to go to court for a marijuana possession charge. We are sound asleep, and I'm naked when a cop just walks into our house, which they aren't allowed to do, and wakes us up. Tells us he had a warrant for Eric's arrest, and for us to get up. Well, Eric gets out of bed and I get up with a blanket wrapped around me, and the cop tells us to sit on the couch. BC, he's going to search the house, then looks at me again, and tells me to put the blanket back on the bed. I then inform him of the obvious, that I'm naked, and if he want me to put the blanket down he's going to have to let me get dressed. He then points his taser at me, tells me to give him the blanket, and that I'm not going to do anything, including getting dressed, but sit down the couch because officer safety. So I give him the blanket and sit down, and my husband, who is almost at his breaking point, and has already been arguing with the officer, wraps his arms around me to cover me. The cop then tells him to move away from me, and he tells him you're going to have to shoot me to get me away from her, and a few other things I won't repeat. When the second cop, who had been outside, hears raised voices and comes inside, gun drawn. Luckily, this cop is someone I know, a good guy who I know will help us. He immediately asked why I was naked, and when the other cop tries to interrupt me, he told him to shut the hell up. Cop #2 flipped his shit on Cop #1 after covering me with a blanket and made him leave. He then told me to go get some clothes I've been crying for at this point, and tells me everything is going to be okay. He hugged me and told me he was so sorry for what just happened, and that the first officer was going to be reprimanded, apologized to my boyfriend. He told me he had to take Eric in, but that he had a bond and let us call the bondsman to meet us in the jail, so he'd be right back home. I was really shook up by the whole incident, so he called the bondsman back himself and asked her to come to our house and pick me up, and we'd all go together to the jail, so I wouldn't have to be alone. When I was around 14 or 15, my family lived in a subdivision comprised mostly of cops and state troopers. Our next door neighbor was a sheriff, but he partied 24/7, had a relationship with my friend, who was only 16 or 17 at the time, and he was just a terrible person. My parents and the other people in the neighborhood thought he was great though, and would party over there a lot. One night, my brother, 11 years old, and his friend, 10 years old, and myself were walking home from a friend's house at about 8 o'clock at night, while our parents were at the sheriff's house for a party. We were walking along the road when a car started trailing behind us with dark tinted windows. The speed limit was 45 miles per hour, but they were barely going 20 and kept going slow past us, then circling back. Me being older, I told the younger boys to run ahead, hide behind one of our neighborhood's signs, and wait for me. They ran away terrified, while I sped up my walk into a steady jog, and the car kept following, going even slower now, to keep up with me. I was in my cowboy boots, since it was summer, and I was playing down at the creek, and these made it so hard to run. I ran as fast as I can, and the car followed. I was close to the neighborhood, where I was sure nothing bad could happen, because there were cops and state troopers and others outside, but another car with blacked out windows came towards me from the opposite direction. The front of the neighborhood had an entrance and exit, separated by an oak tree, and when I ran into the neighborhood, the two cars hurtled into the entrance and exit, and a bunch of men got out of the car and started chasing me and yelled, "Get back here, B**********H, so we can F*******KU. I was a little bit further ahead than them and made it to my neighbors, where I hid in their backyard until the men were gone. The whole time, my brother and his friend were hiding behind the signs, so I went and got them, and they were trembling, as was I. We took a detour to get to the party my parents and all the cops and state troopers were at, because the two cars kept going back and forth down the main road, so we tried to hide in the shadows of the houses nearby. We finally made it to the party. I'm crying, dirty, and shaking in the driveway of the partying sheriff's house, and the boys are freaking out and go and get my parents and the Leos. My parents and the sheriff come out and ask me what happened. I explain the story and they say that I must have just been paranoid and that we were making things up because it was dark and we were scared. They told me to go home or go in the sheriff's house and watch TV until they were ready to go. They were very drunk and having a good time. I told them that the guys were still going up and down the road if they wanted to see, and that they should call it into the station or have an on-duty officer come check it out, but they still didn't believe me. The sheriff came out after a while and I was still crying and shaking. What does he say to me? Don't ever try to ruin my party again by crying wolf. After that, I really hated him, and the situation still makes me go into full panic mode when thinking about it. It makes me really distrustful of police also, since I know that at least some of them are doing unlawful things in their free time or just don't care when they are off duty. The cop told me to sit down, then while standing over me said very firmly to not call the police unless a crime was committed. This was in response to someone seriously threatening to kill me. Before that day, my neighbor had yelled at me a lot and had physically pushed me around a couple of times. I kept to myself and had done nothing to him at all except to deny him use of my bathroom. He didn't have a bathroom since he was living in a shed on his property. That day, he came over in a screaming fury because I had cut down my old, unused utility pole, and it had nowhere to fall but onto his property. There was no fence, and it was just an open poor quality lawn. Since the pole was too big and heavy for me to move by myself, I had started to cut it into pieces right there. His fury was that the sawdust was going to kill his grass. I calmly asked him if he would help me move the pole to be entirely in my yard. He responded very loudly with a lot of swear words that he was going to take the chainsaw from me and use it on me. Well, I decided that a death threat was reason enough to finally call the police to make a complaint about him. After calling the RCMP, they had an officer call me back. I explained the situation and that I believed the death threat to be serious, given the man's prior behavior. The cop showed up, talked to my neighbor for a few minutes, then came over to my house. He had little to say other than to not call the police unless a crime is committed. I told him it was a credible death threat, which was a crime. His response to that was again to tell me not to call the police unless a crime is committed. He obviously did not believe me. I calmly told him that if the police were unwilling to take the matter seriously, that the next time this neighbor physically harmed me or threatened my life, I would deal with the situation myself, and I definitely would not be the one to call the police. The cop didn't have anything to say about that. Before that, I had great respect for police. After this, it became clear how fallible cops were, and that I could not count on them. Sometime later, a year, a month, I'm not sure now, since it was some years ago, the neighbor started another altercation. He spun his ATV tires in the alley behind my house, intentionally spitting gravel at me while I was mowing my lawn. I confronted him in the alley, asking him why the hell he was doing that. Apparently a small rock had zoomed out from my mower onto his lawn, and this was his response. He was screaming obscenities, started kicking at my legs, while holding up his fist, pumping it forward, as if to hit me. He kicked me in my testicles, luckily not hard enough to totally incapacitate me, just enough for me to start to lose my cool. He kept getting closer and closer with his pumping fist. When he got close enough for me to easily reach him, I grabbed him by the throat with one hand and slammed him up against the nearby power pole in the alley. Clearly I startled him. He was used to me just calmly taking the shit he dealt out. He shriveled up and started whining while his woman screamed at me. I told him that I had enough of him and I wasn't going to take his shit anymore. If he wanted a fight, I was finally going to give him one. I let him go, and he quickly retreated out of range. He and his woman, who he often physically and verbally abused, screamed that they were going to call the police. I said to go right ahead, that I wanted them to. There were witnesses, one who I knew would tell the truth about what happened. I went inside and wrote up a statement about the whole incident. No cop ever showed though. That neighbor never bothered me directly again. When he moved away, the last thing he did was to drive his pickup truck back and forth over my lawn, spinning the tires to ruin the lawn. Since he was operating a large, many thousand-pound vehicle, I figured it wasn't smart to confront him. I didn't report the vandalism to the police because I figured they wouldn't take it seriously, and because I figured that it was the last time I would ever see the $$H0 len. I was just glad to be finally done with him. If you made it this far, you owe it to yourself to subscribe.